Um,
It's really common, and most people look at it and say it's great.
a philosophical movement in the
Yeah.
what 1500s or 1400s?
Well, it's still current today, but in the 1400s they were dominant in Florence, and they actually in Florence the variation of the school said if it is not already in authority, it is not worth considering, and they very much stopped on the young Leonardo da Vinci,
Right.
um, who hated this theory. Da Vinci refused to learn Latin and Greek until he discovered that people 200 years before had actually thought an experimental approach to the world,
Now,
including, by the way, Aquinas and Albertus Magnus.
now I don't know enough to be able to comment as an authority on this, but what that sounds like a great deal is what goes back to the end of the scholastic debate. You know, the closing of the scholastic debate by Bishop Tempier that occurred in Paris there in 1278, I think it was. That it sounds like an accretion from that. In other words, before that, there was the tradition, at least if um, what's his name, not Tillage de Chardin. Um,
What, just shut down?
if if Joseph Pieper is right in his book Scholasticism, then the tradition earlier than that was to bring up authorities and then question the authorities and see whether or not they yielded any new information. And that was the whole experiment that generated the medieval scholastic thing, right? But
Yeah.
when it when they began to generate all that new questioning and information, which is extremely rich, they also began to question the connection, the Platonic connection between the thing and what it was representing. But human thought itself came into question. So that was what caused the split between the realists and the nominalists, as you know.
Uh-huh.
Which before was a healthy debate, but when Tempier stepped in and Tempier said no more nominalism, no more of this teaching that it says that we made it all up, that there is no other world. Tempier Tempe suggests that, or he commanded that the only thing we're going to say is that these things do represent something beyond this world, and the only thing then that we can actually talk about is the authorities. And if it's not an authority already, it cannot be brought into the conversation. So he condemned all these different people, including huge chunks of Aristotle. And we were left basically with Plato and anybody that agreed with Plato. And that may be that the movement that comes after 13 and 1400s that Da Vinci was objecting to,
It
maybe
sounds
that,
very much like it.
doesn't it?
Sounds
Yeah.
very much like it.
I don't know what that's called.
I don't know.
Authoritarianism?
But I do know that its lingering effect is that you can't publish a scientific paper without lots of
Right.
references.
Lots of references. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Because you have to appeal to authority.
you think William of Ockham?
Yeah, I think he started that problem.
Did you end up reading The End of the Modern World by Guardini?
I have not read The End of the Modern World.
Okay, highly recommended.
Mom
I
wants
know.
me to. I should.
I know you got a list of your arm long or whatever, but it's a great insight into this because he's suggesting that the modern world began after that Tempier event. So when the scholasticism was basically shut down, the modern world kind of took over, and the modern world was the vision that you had to have authorities on everything, and that things were essentially materialistic only and commodities. So he says that the rise of the wealthy businessman began roughly around there.
Well, obviously, I'm speaking without knowledge when because I haven't read Guardini on that point, but that sounds extremely accurate to me.
Yeah.
Will, as soon as you let go of the joy and think everything has to be codified into neat little boxes,
Yeah.
um, your world is dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine.
Literally. I mean, it
Yeah.
becomes a dead world. I mean, that's the whole point of materialism, isn't it?
Yes, it is. What can we control? Is what
Uh,
it all comes down to.
Interesting. Control and power. Yeah,
Yeah.
Guardini makes that point too. That the only thing you're left with is control and power, especially when you strip things of their, what was the word he used? Not quiddity, but their essence. Their life force, vitality. That's the word he used. Vitality. From vitae. Yeah, I think really that's the issue that we're looking at is maybe the Enlightenment, which occurs in the 1700s, is sort of an outcropping of something that begins back there in the 1300s. Highly possible. Now, I had always thought, and I may be wrong on this, highly possible. I had always thought that the what are you shooting at, buddy?
Pedestrian on the street.
Oh, okay. I had always thought that the
I am listening to you though, Will.
oh, that's okay, because I'm recording it. So, I had always thought that the accidents, the natural accidents that occurred in the 1300s, were so devastating that they ruined the mind of Western world. That it was already on the rocks because the end of the scholastic debate being shut down. And then immediately afterwards you had the cooling down, and then the famine, and then the plague, and then the 100 Years' War, and then the shifting to Avignon. I mean, that's one damn thing after another.
There was a lot.
Yes.
But what you and I both seem to be contending right here is that it began before the death.
I think it did. And that's not without precedent even in our own time. I was interested to note that the Entartete Kunst movement, the forbidden art, all that we have been taught was an outcropping from World War I and the awful things that happened to people because of that devastating conflict. But apparently that whole art movement was beginning before World War I. It was a response to the Belle Arts epoch, that whole thing that was in Paris, and Monet, and who was the other? Alphonse Mucha. A sort of like grunge movement of the early 20th century. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was beginning in Europe before the actual cataclysm of the 1300s, and the cataclysm of the 1300s was just sort of like, see, we told you.
Well, who are you getting down there?
I don't know, just ghosts. People that disappear when I try to actually focus in on them. That's the trouble with pedestrians these days. They just disappear when you try to focus on them. Nobody to shoot
There
at.
does seem to be like an infinite number of these people too.
Look
Look
at
at
crazy. Then they go away when I try and shoot at them. So anyway, I guess my point in all this is, what is my point? I don't know. Let's go fuck some shit up and then go to bed.
What time is it right now?
What time is it?
I got 10 minutes, Will.
10 minutes. All right. Well, let's go do it.
It's 11:40 right here.